Okay, so let's go back into the past a little bit and talk about the Rothschilds. I think it's important to really understand the history of this family. It's been mentioned that Jeffrey Epstein represented the Rothschilds in the emails. So let's find out a little bit more about this family. Here we go.
The Rothschilds created one of the world's first international financial networks, moving gold, silver, and government bonds across borders in weeks rather than months. And then, Europe exploded into war. The Napoleonic Wars changed everything. Britain alone spent an estimated £1.6 billion fighting Napoleon, an astronomical sum at the time, equivalent to hundreds of billions today. The British government struggled to move gold safely across hostile territory. The Rothschilds solved this problem. Nathan Rothschild, based in London, coordinated the transfer of millions of pounds worth of gold across Europe, paying soldiers, funding allies, and ensuring Britain's war machine never ran out of money. This wasn't just banking. It was logistical genius. The Rothschilds used couriers, coded messages, and trusted agents to move capital faster than any state bureaucracy. By financing Britain's war effort, they didn't just earn profits, they earned influence. By 1815, Nathan Rothschild was reportedly one of the wealthiest men in Britain, with personal assets estimated in the tens of millions of pounds, a fortune unmatched outside royalty. By the time Napoleon was defeated in 1815, the Rothschild name had become synonymous with reliability, speed, and financial power. One famous and often misunderstood moment came after the Battle of Waterloo. Nathan Rothschild reportedly received news of the outcome up to 24 hours before the British government. Whether or not every detail of the legend is true, what matters is the reality behind it. Information was power. The Rothschilds invested heavily in intelligence networks, spending vast sums on couriers and informants across Europe, understanding that knowing events before others allowed them to manage risk, capital, and opportunity better than anyone else. As the 19th century progressed, war after war erupted across Europe. Revolutions, independence movements, and imperial conflicts all required funding. Governments increasingly turned to the Rothschilds not because of ideology, but because they were dependable. By the mid-1800s, the family had underwritten government loans worth hundreds of millions of pounds, financing wars, railways, canals, and post-war reconstruction. Importantly, the Rothschilds didn't fight wars, they financed states. This distinction matters. Their power came from neutrality. Lending to governments was not about loyalty, but about credibility and repayment. Wars were risky, but governments backed by taxation, land, and future revenue were still the safest borrowers available. By the mid-19th century, the Rothschilds were effectively bankers to Europe. They financed the British Empire, the Austrian Empire, Prussia, France, and beyond. They funded armies, but also the peace that followed: railways, canals, and industrial expansion. The Rothschilds were involved in financing a significant share of Europe's major infrastructure projects, many of which were built using war debt converted into long-term bonds. The 20th century brought industrialized warfare on a scale never seen before. World War I cost an estimated $186 billion at the time, over $4 trillion in today's money. Entire economies were mobilized, gold reserves vanished, national debts exploded. While global finance diversified beyond single families, the Rothschilds remained embedded in sovereign bond markets, central banking relationships, and post-war reconstruction finance. By World War II, global finance had evolved even further. Central banks, governments, and institutions took direct control of war financing. But the Rothschild legacy had already reshaped how wars were funded. The idea that conflicts could be financed through debt markets, bonds, and international capital flows was now standard practice. This is where myth often overtakes reality. The Rothschilds did not control governments, start wars, or secretly rule the world. But they understood something far more important. Wars are temporary, but debt is permanent. The real power wasn't in choosing who won. It was in structuring how nations paid for conflict long after the fighting stopped. Even today, modern warfare is funded the same way. Governments borrow trillions. The United States alone has spent over $8 trillion on wars since 2001, largely financed through debt. Central banks expand balance sheets, and inflation quietly spreads the cost across populations. This system didn't appear overnight. It evolved through centuries of conflict, and the Rothschilds were among the first to master it. Their true legacy is not war profiteering, but financial architecture. They helped shape modern international finance, cross-border lending, sovereign debt markets, and the idea that capital could move faster than armies. In doing so, they demonstrated a brutal truth of history. Wars may be won with weapons, but they are sustained with money. The Rothschilds survived monarchies, revolutions, world wars, and economic collapses because they didn't depend on regimes, they depended on systems. While kings fell and flags changed, debt remained, and where debt existed, finance followed. Today, the family no longer dominates global finance the way legends suggest, but their influence lives on in the systems they helped build. Every time a government issues war bonds, finances military spending through debt, or relies on international capital markets, it is following a model refined over centuries. Empires collapse on the battlefield, but financial systems outlive them. The Rothschilds understood this before almost anyone else. They didn't finance war for glory. They financed it because history proved one thing again and again. Nations may fight wars, but someone always pays the bill. And the family that learned how to finance war learned how to survive every era that followed.